Hello everyone, my name is Borax and I've been on a mission to play and rate every single champion in the support role. Today we'll be looking at one of my all-time favorite and most played champions, Rammus. Let's quickly go over his abilities and then find out why he could work out as a support. He has his passive which grants Rammus' auto attacks on hit based on his total armor. Next he has his Q, where Rammus transforms into a ball for up to 6 seconds while also gaining stacking movement speed during this time. When Rammus collides with an enemy, he deals magic damage, knocks them back slightly, and slows them slightly for 1 second. Then Rammus has his W, which grants him a ton of bonus armor and magic resistance. Enemies that auto Rammus take magic damage equal to his passive's bonus damage. Next he has his E, which is a short range point and click taunt that also grants Rammus bonus attack speed. Finally he has his ultimate, which lets Rammus leap to his target location, slowing and damaging all enemies he hits. You can cast this ability while you're in your Q to also knock up all enemies that are in the center of your ultimate impact zone. The range of this ability also scales with movement speed, meaning you can cast it from further away if you are utilizing your Q's movement speed effectively. Rammus is a mega tank with a bit of utility and decent CC, but does he have enough to thrive in the bot lane? Well, let's find out together, as I rate Rammus, the Armadillo, on his ability to be played in the support role.
Okay.
In the early game, I like to rate a support's ability to invade lane and roam. I have come once again to spread the gospel of the point and click CC and how amazing it is, but truthfully, Rammus' E might be one of the most awkward abilities that fits this category. Not only is the range super duper short on his taunt, but it doesn't feel as consistent or fast like a Leona flash Q for instance. For invading, I will give Rammus a D+ rating. If someone is AFK or caught out completely off guard, then it's definitely doable, but honestly, isn't every champion good at invading in that case? His level 1 power is pretty abysmal, so he also won't be the best when it comes to the counter invade, but I suppose in that instance you could start Q to at least knock up multiple foes and then pray your team has other abilities to win the fight, as all you will have left are some pitiful autos. Now let's talk about laning. We like to judge a champion based on 3 categories: poking, peeling, and all-inning. Now while invading on Rammus might not be ideal, trying to poke as Rammus is way worse. Usually poking really matters in the early levels of the game, and Rammus has some of the worst lane abilities possible for bot lane. You have your Q, which doesn't give you a burst of movement speed, but rather stacking movement speed, which gives enemies a ton of time to prepare, and what's even worse, it's so easily blocked by minions. Then you have that E, which, while point and click, has the smallest range ever and honestly not a super long duration early on. While your W is nice in that it reflects auto damage back, usually you'll be getting poked by enemy support's abilities where it's fairly useless, and even against ADC auto attacks, you don't trade positively in your favor until you have a bit more items. For poking, I will give Rammus a F+. If you can somehow taunt someone and have your W up, then he actually does decent damage, but that is super unrealistic. The main reason he even gets a plus is because of how great taunts are in combination with turrets. If the enemy is ever hitting your turret, then you could consider flashing on them to taunt them with your E, forcing them to auto-attack you, which then makes your turret target them for some cheesy kills. Again, if the enemy has half a brain, this will never work, but thankfully a lot of enemies will mostly play with a quarter brain maximum. Now peeling. That's something supports might have to do, but once again it's something Rammus would rather not have to do. Most supports spike pretty hard once they've hit level 2 or 3, but Rammus is not such a champion, and he does really enjoy having some levels. That being said, if the enemy has to get close to you in order to all-in, then he's not half bad, as you can look to knock up the enemy ADC with Q and taunt them with E, forcing them to target you, which, while you have your W shield up, should be enough tankiness to get away, especially after they got rid of that brutal self-slow on W. The problem is, because his CC is so short range, he can really struggle to interrupt a play from happening, like a hook or a combo, so getting that subpar taunt off might not be enough peel to save someone. Then, he doesn't have the best AoE CC, so he can really struggle against ganks that are coming in. For peeling, I will give Rammus a D+. Point and click CC is amazing, but point and click CC that is actually kinda hard to use in lane because of the short range is not very amazing. Finally, all-inning, my favorite category, and something Rammus is actually pretty
Okay.
at. You see, the Rammus playstyle is really all about getting into the enemy's face with his Q, forcing them to attack him, and then hoping they die before you do. What is really awkward about his all-in though, is you usually have to come from some kind of angle, and then there will be certain wave states that you literally won't be able to get on top of someone because of getting minion blocked. For all-inning, I will give Rammus an A rating. During the laning 2v2 phase, it's pretty much an F+ for the same reason why his poke is terrible. But after your first back, if the enemy is ever slightly near your tower, you can look to roll in at super high speeds, knock back your opponent, and taunt them until your ADC or jungler can arrive. He is one of the best champions at punishing an isolated ADC if they have a desynced back with their support, or if the support is roaming. But in the 2v2 fight, he can still struggle as he doesn't do the most damage and can still be kited early on. But as long as your jungler understands that he can gank alongside the armadillo, then you can easily rack up a bunch of early kills, which you'll definitely want to do, as every other element of laning for Rammus is miserable. Now that we've talked about Rammus' laning prowess, let's rate the matchups that he might have to face. Rammus is an anti-AD specialist, which makes the prevalence of AP mages in the bot lane very annoying. All the lanes where people can poke you from afar will just be miserable, as you'll be stuck under your tower and all ending them won't be too easy, as they should always have proper spacing against the Rammus. In these lanes, and truthfully most lanes, you kind of need your ADC to 2v1 the lane while you either AFK or look for good roams. The reason why these champions are in the impossible tier is because of how difficult it can be to 2v1 these lanes for your ADC. The next annoying champions are the ones with a lot of peel that can easily cancel Rammus when he is in his queue, as it does count as a channel. He also can really struggle against supports that specialize in saving one person, as Rammus really wants to try and focus down one person. The hookers can be quite potent, because if they ever hit your ADC, Rammus will be too slow to respond in order to save them. Now the rest of these melee supports are definitely not great matchups, but at least they have to get closer to you in order to do something, which should hopefully give you better opportunities to peel for your ADC. A lot of these champions are also decent at peeling though, so it's not very fun to face them. Now Senna and Ashe are terrible matchups during the lane because of their range, but if you can survive early on and stack armor against them, it actually turns out to be pretty alright, and if you can ever find a taunt on them, they will be toast. The same applies to these enchanters, which don't have the best CC tools to peel a Rammus charging in at them with his Q. The two best matchups that I've found for Rammus support are actually Pyke and the rest of the Hail of Blade supports that exist. These champions usually want to build lethality, which can really struggle if Rammus stacks armor. And while yes, Twitch does build AP, he has no peel for his ADC or himself, meaning any taunt will mean instant death for this champion. And while he wants to roam all over the map, so does Rammus, so you can actually match him quite well. Finally, we have a bunch of champions in the who plays these guys even, as I'm waiting to see people pick these characters in my games. When it comes to what ADCs you want to play with, the number one answer of course is ADCs that won't tilt in the laning phase, as will be so terrible for both of you, and the way Rammus support wants to play is by roaming all over the map. Therefore, I think the best ADC along Rammus is Ezreal, as he has the best fighting chance to 1v2 the lane as you roam by just farming up with his Qs and using his E to avoid engages. Because you are a useless Manobo in lane, you really need to roam, so let's talk about that now. I've recently been playing a lot of junglers in the support role, and an advantage of doing so is their potential to gank other lanes, which would normally be their job. Well, I think I've actually found one of the best possible roaming champions in the support role in the form of Rammus. Normally in the jungle you have to use your Q to farm camps, which means the ability could be on cooldown before you want to make a play, but in the support role, you don't have such an obligation and can always have that Q up to speedily run into a lane and really mess someone up with your taunt and that knockback. Because I think roaming is so important as Rammus support, I even took Predator to really guarantee that I can reach someone and punish them for overextending. For roaming, I will give Rammus an S+. The biggest drawback is his lack of damage, so you do want to gank lanes where you know the person you are ganking for can finish them off, but being able to run around the map at breakneck speeds while also having a point-and-click CC tool truly makes Rammus a menace on the Rift when it comes to his roaming. Let's give Rammus a rating for his ability to support in the early game, which will slot at a B. If we only took a look at his lane, he'd probably deserve about a D+, but his roaming potential really skyrockets his rating here. If you can get some successful ganks off in the early game to build a lead for your team, you can truly single-handedly decide a game. At the same time, if your roams don't work out and your ADC is super behind, while you've also fed a couple of kills over to the enemy team, then you would also be single-handedly deciding the game, but in a very negative way. I do wonder though, what kind of impact might Rammus have when it comes to the...
Okay.
In the late game, responsibilities of a support I like to rate include their ability to get picks into teamfight. Like roaming, getting picks is all about punishing players' mistakes. With Rammus, any person who is isolated in a 1v1 is committing a major mistake, as in an instant you can show up with a million movement speed thanks to his Q, as well as Predator active and a dead man's plate that I would frequently rush. Against single targets, Rammus is truly king, and I don't think there are many more champions who are better than him here, so I'll give him an S+. I will point out though, that you can go so fast your teammates might not be able to get there instantly, but if the target is AD and you have been stacking armor, then you should be able to stall enough for your team to collect the gold that's waiting for them. Now let's talk about team fighting, where support's responsibilities include engaging, peeling, and sometimes dealing damage. While single target CC is great for getting picks, you really want to have a lot of AoE CC for engaging, which sadly Rammus does lack a bit. Your best AoE CC tool comes from your Q, but it doesn't last very long and it can easily be body blocked by frontline. The workaround for this problem comes from his ultimate, which can be cast during your Q channel to literally leap over those tanks and hopefully catch those carries in the middle of your R, which will knock them up, and you can then taunt someone to prolong the CC chain. Because his ultimate range increases with Rammus's movement speed, you can actually engage from far away, which is a double-edged sword, because while it is nice, it could mean you are too far away from the rest of your team for them to do something. For engaging, I will give Rammus an A- rating. There is a really high chance that you try to fly in with your ultimate and just miss everyone you're going for and get blown up instantly, as you can't reach anyone to taunt them. Having to use 2 of your abilities to make the engage work effective isn't amazing, especially when you consider that if it does work out perfectly, you only get a bit of a knock-up on a couple of people that they can see coming and dash away from the impact zone. Point and click CC is king when it comes to peeling, and thankfully, that's exactly what Rammus has with his taunt, which lasts 2 whole seconds at max rank, making it one of the longest point and click CC abilities in the entire game. It is a bit annoying that it is so short range though, so oftentimes against those super fast assassins, I find myself spamming the E button around my ADC to interrupt their combos, but if you do hit them with it, then they are guaranteed to be toast. It's also solid against bruisers who are running into your team, and then you can look to Q them after for more disruption. For peeling, I will give Rammus an A rating. That taunt ability is so powerful that if you can save it for the right moment, it can completely shut a plate down. But it is a bit tricky to use due to its short range that requires you to be very close to your carries. Rammus is a very unique champion where the way he deals damage best is from enemies hitting him and depleting their own health bar. He also is a champion that deals damage based on how much armor he has, so if you're able to stack a bunch of it, his autos will actually start to chunk. He does still have no ranged abilities, so he really has to be in someone's face to kill them, but he is one of the few supports out there that can actually 1v1 people fairly well as long as he isn't too far behind and they aren't full health. For dealing damage, I will give Rammus a B+. He has 0 poke, which most supports that deal damage have, so he's very committal if he wants to deal damage, which isn't great for a role that is usually behind on resources. But if he does somehow find himself with the lead, they could be a true menace to any AD characters that aren't a fan of the old gray screen. Before we rate Rammus's overall ability to support, let's take a look at the runes and items that I would recommend. I think the best keystone for Rammus support is Predator, so you can fully embrace that roaming playstyle to get the rest of your team ahead. It's also nice in teamfights as you can pop it before channeling your Q to give your ultimate a ridiculous amount of range that will truly catch most foes off guard. Because we are going to be stacking and prioritizing movement speed, I then like to take Celerity to bump that up to ridiculous levels, as well as Water Walking, as you'll be spending a lot of time in the river looking for plays between lanes. The other keystone you could go for if you think you'll be spending more time in lane is Aftershock, which does synergize nicely with Rammus, because if you can get it procced and then you can activate your W, then you will actually have infinite resistances and will be dealing more damage to opponents with your W and autos. Now let's talk about items. For your gold income item, Relic Shield is your best bet, and you should make sure to proc it as much as possible when you're roaming to other lanes if they need a push out, as the stacks can be hard to come by when you are spending very limited time in lane. Now your first back should almost always be boots, especially if you have Predator, as you want to get that active as soon as possible. I frequently like to then upgrade to tier 2 boots, which commonly were plated steel caps, as I would be picking Rammus into predominantly full AD teams. You could also go for mobility boots if you really want to fly all over the map, but while it is a lot of fun, it might actually be too much movement speed. Speaking about movement speed, one of my favorite items to rush on Rammus support was a Dead Man's Plate, because not only does it give you armor, it gives you a great passive of movement speed that really lets Rammus zoom. Another great armor item for Rammus is Thornmail, as the healing reduction from it is nice and it synergizes so well with your W and taunt, turning Rammus into a real force to be reckoned with. Hypothetically, an item like Turbo Chem Tank sounds like it would be so good, but I legit never ever see anyone build this item, and it's not ideal for Rammus as it doesn't give him armor which he really desires. Oftentimes, I didn't end up the game with a mythic, so I would stick to building a Dead Man's Thornmail and maybe even a Frozen Heart, as armor is so good on Rammus. But if the enemy team does have a bit of AP, I think building 2 armor items into a mythic of Evan Shroud would be a really good approach for being tanky and useful. Another build path that I could see working, that I admittedly just thought of, would be to go Shirelia's Battle Song to boost the movement speed of yourself and teammates to catch people off guard, and I think in a lot of cases it might actually be better than Evan Shroud. Now that we've talked about the runes and items, let's give Rammus an overall rating for his ability to support, which will slot at an A+. I'll be honest, I really wanted to put him in S- or above, because in games where teams are full AD, picking Rammus just feels so good, and his roaming is truly incredible. But if the enemy has a fair amount of AP, he doesn't feel that tanky, and holy moly is his laning phase atrocious. You actually can only play the roaming style, so if the enemy team is prepared for that, you will just be giga useless and might have to FF and hope the next game goes better for you. But if the enemy doesn't respect the Rammus pick, make sure to unmute all chat and enjoy as the enemy laners constantly whine about how they have to 2v1 and hit tab to watch their score get worse and worse. Would I recommend you play Rammus Support? Absolutely, especially if you are a later pick in the draft and see that the enemy team is all AD. If you hate seeing Yasuo mids get really fed or Master E's in the jungle, then Rammus is a pretty good pick in the support role, as these champions love to scrap early and Rammus E can really neutralize them. If the enemy is picking a really aggressive bot lane though, or just a lot of mages in general, you shouldn't touch Rammus with a 10-foot pole, no matter what role you might be wanting to try out the roly-poly. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and leave a like, that would be amazing, and if you would consider subscribing, that'd make my day. We also have a Discord, link in the description, so feel free to check that one out if you want to chat. Again, thanks for watching, and I want to wish you good luck and have fun if you are playing Rammus Support yourself. You might need it.